from 1975 up until 2001. The Buffalo Sabres were a playoff lock, if not a bona fide contender. In 28 seasons, so nearly 3 decades, they would miss the playoffs for a grand total of 3 times. Led by some of the all-time greats and Hall of Fame players like Gilbert Perreault, Pat LaFontaine, McGillney, Turgeon, Dominic Hasek.
For his second, clap! Oh, what a save! Do you believe that?
Yet, they were never able to secure that elusive Stanley Cup.
2 series has given up just 1 goal. Here's a chance, score! Well, I think the goaltenders will get a chance. Here's a shot by Patrick at the goal post! Across the blue line, drop pass, it comes to Brett Hull! Oh, trying to roll it back in front for an open net! Dig down! Loose puck, score! It's over! It's over! Brett Hull and Mike Modano were there in overtime. The Dallas Stars are the 1999 Stanley Cup champions!
In the mid-2000s, the Sabres would climb their way back to championship contention, as they would make back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals. And then, it would happen. The team would fall apart. Dominoes would begin to fall. They would begin trading away star players. Franchise players would walk to free agency. And within a couple of seasons, this team went from a contender to being the biggest disaster in professional hockey. No, the biggest disaster in NHL history. Wait, still no? Arguably the biggest disaster in all of North American professional sports. Not only did they set the NHL record for losing 18 games in a row,
just missed by Thompson. Flyers keeping it in back to the point. The blast, the rebound, they score. Got it in front of the backhand. They score.
This is a tough one. This is a devastating loss right here. Sabres had this game in their hand. 3-0 going into the third period.
But as it stands, the Sabres are now on a 13-year playoff drought, as they're now tied with the New York Jets for the biggest playoff drought in North American professional sports. Year after year, this team, more importantly the fan base, has seen massive disappointment. So it begs the question, what in the hell is going on in Buffalo? Today's video is sponsored by Sundays. This right here is my dog Evie. And if you know corgis, you would know that they're high energy farm dogs. And even though these legs are small, she is fast. But because she is so stocky and her legs are so little, corgis tend to get back issues associated with weight gain. And because of this, I prioritize high quality, healthy food for my little companion here. Sundays makes top tier quality dog food, as their team spent over 3 years researching and developing what might just be the best solution to giving your pup the best food. Unlike other brands who use hyper-processed manufacturing, synthetic vitamins in their food, Sundays came up with an incredible air-dried technique, meaning that their food retains the natural nutrients and flavor without having to deal with the mess associated with wet or raw foods. And if you're based out of the USA, ladies and gentlemen, Sundays is offering my audience a crazy deal. Click the link down below and use code RTH, and you'll receive 50% off your first order. So to all my American audience, I'd really appreciate ya if you gave Sundays a try. And your pooch will thank you. When a team goes from nearly 3 decades of being a contender to a big dumpster fire, there's usually a pretty simple explanation. Their stars get older, maybe they retire, or leave the team to finish their career somewhere else. And if they don't replenish that team with young stars through the draft, they have no chance of sustaining success. And this is exactly what would happen in Buffalo. Because from 1989 all the way up to 2014, the Sabres would go on a 25-year stretch without drafting that Hall of Fame type talent. Yeah, they had some good picks in guys like Vanek, Jason Pominville. Yes, they would draft some good depth, borderline star players in that 25-year stretch. But Vanek and Pominville, in some depth, are not going to win you a cup. And this right here is what's so ironic about this current Buffalo Sabres team. Because from 2014 up until today, Buffalo has done a tremendous job in the draft. Sam Reinhart, Jack Eichel, Dahlin, Power, Benson. Did you know they drafted Brandon Hagel, Dylan Cousins, Middlestat, Jack Quinn? And this right here is what's so fascinating about the world of pro scouting and roster construction. Because the Sabres this past season had one of the youngest teams in NHL history. Their roster's average age was just over 25. 25. For comparison, both Florida and Edmonton had an average age of nearly 30. On one hand, it's a great thing, as this team's filled to the brim with young stars who are still getting better, but it then begs the question, who is mentoring this team? If all your young stars are under the age of 25, who is the veteran that is instilling winning culture into this young core? Back in 22-23, Buffalo ranked 3rd in the league for goals for, which is great, right? Yes, it is. However, they were at the bottom for goals against. Even though a stat like goal differential may seem like a surface level stat, in my opinion, it speaks volume. When a team is in the rebuilding phase, they're gonna play chaotic hockey, with the upside that this chaotic playstyle is entertaining hockey, alongside of the fact that players will be able to develop their offense, but with a massive downside, where players during their most important developmental years will learn to play hockey the wrong way. As there were so many games this season, the last decade, where they would let in 5+ goals from plays that were easily avoidable. Like seriously, during a blowout against the Devils, at the start of the first period, they dump the puck in, 3 Sabres players go behind the net, and not one of them would pick up Alex Holtz, who's wide open in front of the net.
Alex Holtz rings it!
If they were playing in a strict system, this play would have never have happened. At the end of the first, after a failed breakout pass, the Devils would go on a 3-on-2. They would make a pass over to Palat, and pause it here, all 3 backcheckers are standing still, watching the play. If they truly had a winning culture, they would have their head down and prevent what would be, a 2-on-1 against the goalie. Shortly after, the Devils would break in on a 3-on-3. Jesper Bratt would make a pass to the slot. And pause it right here, all of the forwards are just standing still. Like, what is going on?
Turnover finds the trailer, puts it home!
There is a serious lack of winning culture here. This right here is what is so bizarre about this team. Every year, The Athletic releases an anonymous set of polls. Some of them simple, like who's the best player in the league, Connor McDavid of course, who is the best goalie, Andrei Vasilevsky. But what I love about The Athletic is that they get juicy. Who is the most overrated player in the league? Which player do you most want to punch in the face? And what might just be the most interesting poll is, what is your least favorite place to play on the road? Winnipeg leads the charge, then we have Ottawa and Buffalo. But okay, Rob, what's your point here? Well, this list right here is basically the exact same mindset that goes into a player creating a no-trade list, where if a player signs a contract with a no-move clause, they can list teams which their team cannot trade them to. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Winnipeg, I've heard Buffalo is a great city, but it does give perspective by truly emphasizing how crucial it is that these teams have top-tier management. When the majority of the league has your team on their no-trade list, you're gonna run into non-stop issues in recruiting that top talent to your team. So unless your team is a top contender like Edmonton, it'll be nearly impossible to attract top stars outside of the draft. It'll be very difficult to sign players to team-friendly deals. Therefore, it is extremely important that when you do have a star or a star on the rise, that you treat him well and lock him in for the long term. Yet, Buffalo for a long time now has had some of the most bizarre management strategies I have ever seen. You know this guy? Many of you may know him as the Flyers GM, or the dad of the son who threw a girl's wheelchair down a set of stairs. But as for Sabres fans, they would know him for being electric.
To Pominville. The one-timer, he scores! Judy Briere!
However, heading into his contract year, the Sabres couldn't get a deal done in the offseason. And because they had a team rule in that they don't sign players during the season, by the time contract negotiations opened back up, Briere, their captain, would leave the team. We can go into the Jack Eichel fiasco where they wouldn't let him get the surgery he wanted. There was a big drama that turned into a blockbuster deal where Jack Eichel would lead Vegas to a Stanley Cup. We could bring up the Ryan O'Reilly trade where they would ship him to St. Louis, and that exact same season, O'Reilly would lead the Blues to a Stanley Cup, win the Selke Trophy, and take home the playoff MVP trophy, which would be followed up by the biggest firing event in NHL history, where the Sabres owners would clean house, firing everyone. When Buffalo made a big splash to acquire Jeff Skinner, it seemed great from face value. However, Jeff Skinner had not, and still has not, played a single game in the playoffs. Talk about creating a winning culture here, because after they signed Skinner for $9 million, it would lead to some cap issues, which would indirectly lead to Sam Reinhart being traded, where he would go on to score nearly 60 goals and win the cup. Whereas Jeff Skinner would be bought out this season. And this right here is a massive issue. I love the fact that they built a team full of young stars, but the fact that they don't have proven leaders has left a massive hole in their team culture. And it's so frustrating that they have had those character stars, but somehow always just end up trading them away. Think about the optics here. The Sabres would trade these players. Okay, these players have now won a combined 7 Stanley Cups, a Selke playoff MVP award, and a Vezina, because what Buffalo is doing is basically the polar opposite of the Yzer plan. They're solely depending on your young talent to lead the charge. But on the other hand, there's a team like Detroit, who have been criticized heavily for signing too many veterans, which has taken away roster spots and ice time from young stars. But there's a reason why teams overpay in free agency to acquire players who have won Stanley Cups. Their experience and leadership is invaluable. Many people have started to bash Yzerman and his veteran signings, but there's a reason. Most of his quote-unquote questionable signings were players who had won a Stanley Cup or Cups, or veteran leaders who have been a part of countless playoff runs. Think about it this way. What have been some of the most successful rebuilds in the last several decades? I would say Pittsburgh ranks among the top. Now granted, they would win the lottery and draft Crosby, but when Crosby joined the team, he wasn't left hung out to dry to create a winning culture at age 18. No! Mario Lemieux came out of retirement to mentor Crosby, alongside some of the all-time greats and guys like Mark Recchi, John LeClaire, Ziggy Palffy, Sergei Gonchar, players that not only had great careers, but were tremendous leaders. So what I'm trying to say in this video is that from face value, it may seem bizarre for a team like Detroit to sign so many veterans, but if you don't build a winning culture through the experience of veteran leadership, your team may just end up being mediocre for decades. Here's the bright side though. I've been pretty harsh on the Sabres this video, but from a place of tough love, Sabres fans, if you made it this far, probably not. But this team has a franchise defenseman in Dahlin, who in my opinion has Norris upside. Like seriously, he has everything you want from that number 1 defenseman. Size, grit, scoring, defense, skating, vision.
Maybe here it is. Dahlin holds it, drags it, score!
A guy in Tage Thompson who I still think can be that 100-point number 1 center.
And here's Thompson. Drag move to the middle, to the net, what a goal!
Several goalies with number 1 upside. And so much depth due to their countless high-end picks, as their roster has the exact same recipe for a perennial contender. Thanks again for Sundays for sponsoring today's video. If you're located in the States, check out my exclusive offer code to receive 50% off your first order. And before we end off here, I did want to say rest in peace to Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau. I had the pleasure to watch them many times in person, and when you're in the arena or even watching at home with your family, when Gaudreau would start to build up momentum, everyone cheering, "Go, Johnny, go!" It was just such a cool experience, and to see that he had so much of a connection with the city, it was just so special.